Welcome to Nature Unheard. I'm Emma, and I'm here to bring you stories of resilience, of curiosity, and insights from groundbreaking ideas. Now, have you ever wondered how much a forest is really worth? If fish could talk, what would they say about our rivers? And can AI save biodiversity where humans can't? Join Adonai, Rachel, and me along with experts on our journey from Jordan to Kazakhstan, Kenya to the UK, as we dive deep into the natural world.
Nature Unheard is a podcast
by the EBRD.
Hey Emma, it's great to be here with you today. How's everything going?
Yeah, not too bad. I went for a walk, which was delightful, on my lunch break.
Lucky you.
But honestly, it wasn't until I was about halfway through that I realised how much I'd been storming around the streets of Canary Wharf zoned out. The sun actually made an appearance, the birds were singing, and I hadn't even noticed any of it until I paused for a moment. It's crazy how easy it is to forget about nature, even when you're surrounded by it, right?
I know exactly what you mean. We get so caught up on everything else. Sometimes we don't even take time to appreciate the environment right in front of us.
Exactly. And that brings us to today's topic, how to make nature actually count. We've all heard about measuring carbon emissions and rising temperatures, but what about the overall health of our planet and ecosystems? Is there a way to keep track of that too? Well, I was chatting with my old BBC pal David Shukman, and he gave me a pretty eye-opening take on it. Here's how he painted the picture.
When we think about this topic, I find it helpful to visualize a sight or an experience. This isn't sort of abstract. And for me, that sight and experience was my first of several trips to the Amazon rainforest. And I will never forget the contrast between being in the forest, dark, noisy, with the monkeys and the birds and the insects by the billion, the magnificent giant trees being a huge store of carbon, doing us the job of capturing the carbon that we're so busy releasing. But to step from that wonderfully biodiverse, rich world out into a deforested area next door, where it was hot as hell, punishing sunshine, monoculture, either fields of soy or pastures for cattle, and silent. And so when I think about the value of nature, the value of biodiversity, the critical importance of finding mechanisms through commerce, finance, political engagement, whatever it is, to make sure that actually we safeguard natural resources that are living and we need to keep alive for our own sakes.
David is spot on, as always. Measuring the state of nature and understanding the importance of ecosystem services is crucial. If we're going to stop and reverse biodiversity loss, this is an area that we really need to solve. This actually takes me back to a story when I was diving in the hub in Egypt. While being in awe with the beauty of the reefs and the underwater ecosystems, I realized that not just the environment, but also tens of thousands of families working in the tourism sector, from hotels to diving centers, also depend on the health and condition of those ecosystems. And that's when I realized that measuring, monitoring, and improving the key indicators of those reefs, of those marine ecosystems and their health is essential, not just for the environment, but also for the livelihood of the communities that depend on those. And to dig deeper into how we can turn this all around, I'm really excited to be joined by Marco Lambertini, the convener of the Nature Positive initiative. He was WWF's International Director General until 2022, and he's been at the forefront of some incredible work in biodiversity. Hi, Marco. It's so good to see you again. It's been a while since our last in-person catch-up. How have you been?
Fantastic. First of all, thank you so much, Adonai, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be interviewed by you. And I've been both excited and concerned, like probably most of us are these days, because on one hand, there is a great opportunity and we see this growing awareness about the risks we are facing, but also the solution that we have to the climate and nature crisis. But on the other hand, all this awareness is yet to translate into real action at scale, at speed, and we continue to see nature degradation continued. So we need to move into a nature positive economy and society. That's the excitement, but also the concern in terms of how fast we can get there.
Okay, that's a very good way of summarizing, and I share your concern. But let's start with the basics, if you don't mind. What is nature positive, and why does it matter to us and to the world?
So nature positive, to put it simply, means a future with more nature, not less. Until now, the future has always been with less nature, because since a long time ago, actually, not just in the last 100 years, but of course in the last 100 years, acceleration and destruction of nature has been extraordinary. And so every year was a year with less nature. Now we need to reverse that trend and begin to embrace the goal, the ambition, that by the end of this decade, we will have more nature than it started. This is the actual nature positive goal, halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030, on a 2020 baseline. So it's a measurable goal. It's not just a vague aspiration. And it is an aspiration that has been embraced by almost 200 countries voting at the Convener Agreement and Biodiversity Framework 2 years ago. For the first time, that was considered the Paris moment for nature, where for the first time we have a global goal, like for climate, that can unite the whole world in the same direction. So that's what nature positive is: halt and reverse. Halt the loss and reverse. So because nature can come back, and quite fast if we give it a chance. Contrary to climate, has a much longer times of recovery. And why is it important? It's important because we depend on nature entirely. These figures about half of the GDP, the economy, depending on nature. We depend on nature 100%. For the water we drink, the food we eat, the air, fresh air, clean air we breathe. For our own mental health and overall satisfaction, emotions, nature is everything. We are part of nature. We came from nature, and we have somehow forgotten that. And now is the question of revaluing nature for what it is, the essential foundation of our well-being.
Well, thanks. I really like the way you summarize what nature positive is. More nature, no less. I think I will steal or quote you next time.
Steal it.
Next time I have to present and explain what nature positive is, because it's been in the past a controversial term, right? People were very cautious about making claims on nature positivity, and that's tricky. Go ahead. That triggered you.
Yeah, no, that's a super important point you're making, Adonai, because that's exactly why we had defined nature positive in a measurable way. Mm-hmm. Until now, let's face it, a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of governments have done a lot of good things for nature, but they were not enough to halt and to reverse, and nature continued to decline. So the nature positive measurable goal, 2020 baseline, 2030 outcome, nature positive, net positive biodiversity. We have net zero emissions for climate. We have net positive biodiversity. Changes completely the approach. The approach is not just doing something good for nature here and there. I plant a tree, I've done a nature positive thing. No, you're not. Planting a tree is not enough. The effort needs to be commensurate to the impact. And the net outcome, because of course some impact is inevitable, will have to be a positive outcome, net positive outcome, more nature, no less.
You're raising several very interesting points, and it is risky that we might end up digressing from the original path, but that's very, very good. And you basically allude to the fact that measures to be nature positive, they need to be additional. The ecosystem outcomes of what we do need to enhance either the extent, the condition, or the significance of that ecosystem, measured as a whole, not individually by action. That's a really, really important point. So how do we put a number on nature, both in scientific terms that you've alluded to, and in economic terms? How do we crack that nut?
There are two tough nuts. The first one about measuring nature. So because, of course, the old say goes, we can't manage what we don't measure. I would say also we can't change what we don't measure, because all this exercise is about changing. It's about changing direction in the way we continue to prosper, continue to develop as humanity, but respecting nature. So that change cannot happen unless we measure the progress that we're making towards that change. And so measuring nature is the first challenge. And it is a complicated challenge because nature is complex. And particularly biodiversity, the living component of nature, is complex. And let's face it, we've never been able to measure nature better than today, but still we can't measure all dimensions and elements of nature. We don't even know how many species exist on the planet, let alone, many other interactions between them. So this is the first challenge. Don't make the perfect enemy of the good, meaning find some meaningful but also practical ways to measure biodiversity, or rather the state of biodiversity, the state of nature, to be able to drive our action to deliver more nature, not less, and to know that we are getting there. So measuring nature is fundamental, and we need to keep it simple but meaningful at the same time.
How about the economic value of it? Because that's
a harder nut to crack. First thing comes to mind is what a few years ago Chinese President Xi Jinping said. He said, green is gold. Mm-hmm. And he meant that actually from now on, nature needs to be considered a valuable asset for our economy and our society. I think anyone you ask, if you walk through the street here in London or everywhere in the world and you ask people, do you think nature is something valuable? Everybody will say yes. Mm-hmm. It's intuitive to think that nature is important. But when actually comes to the economic value of nature, today nature is practically invisible. Nature becomes paradoxically valuable only when it's dead. Think about it. This is a strong statement, but if you think about it, a tree becomes valuable when it's cut down and sold as timber. A fish becomes valuable when it's fished out of the sea and put on your plate, and so on and so forth. So, a tree that is in the forest or a fish that contributes to the ecological balance of the ocean have no value, no economic value. What does it mean? It means they're expendable and they have no chance to compete for economic development that destroy forests, that overfish the ocean. And that's a fundamental problem, because unless you value economically, not only economically, but also economically, the services that trees and wetlands and rivers and the ocean produce to our economy, they will continue to be destroyed at no cost.
I didn't realize that Xi Jinping had made that statement. Last year I was traveling across Panama, and right next to the Soberania National Park, I saw almost the same graffiti. The gold of Panama is green. Uh-huh. So it was quite interesting. It was quite moving, actually. I took a photo of that graffiti. But second, what you've described is basically the textbook definition of the tragedy of the commons. Mm-hmm. Where a public resource that is common is actually depleted by individuals or individual entities against the greater good, right? So in that sense, since we are actually living and suffering that market failure, what is the role of governments and policymakers in all this?
So governments play a fundamental role like other actors, of course. This is, turning our nature negative economy and society into a nature positive one requires a whole of society approach. One actor can't do it alone, but government's fundamental role to play is in beginning, if I may say so, in beginning to shift the nature negative incentives of today to nature positive ones. There is a UNEP, UN Environmental Program Analysis, published just at the end of last year, that calculates in 2.6 trillions the subsidies the government pay every year, and they are harmful to nature. If you add to that the estimated, which I think is an underestimate, $5 to $7 trillion that public investment attach to the same and move in the same direction, you get to about 7 to 9 trillion. You know how much money is the global military spending in the world? The highest level all times was in 2023. Probably, unfortunately, 2024 will be higher, but 2.3 trillion. So basically, we are spending 3 to 4 times more money on a war to nature than actually on the wars that we
were unfortunately fighting.
Yeah, unfortunately and sadly fighting with each other. Like if nature is the worst enemy. So that redirection, the redirection of those subsidies to support the transition to nature positive activities, farming, fishing, infrastructure, is a fundamental dimension. That's what government most important job is. And create a narrative, Adonai, that convince the users that actually that redirection of funding is not only useful for the collectivity, for humanity in abstract terms, but is actually going to benefit them as individuals, as families, as businesses. That's the narrative that we need to develop and persuade people to really embrace the transition.
Okay, this is starting to become overwhelming for a little development banker here, but in that sense, we've spoken about science, we've spoken about economics, macroeconomics. What is the role of multilateral development banks? What is the role of commercial banks? Because we just lend money.
You just lend money, and the just is an understatement.
I was being provocative here.
I can imagine. Because, I mean, honestly, value determines price. What doesn't have a price doesn't have a value. So economic value is fundamental driver of any activity and any behavior. Like it or not, that's the reality. And today, nature value is zero. In fact, is negative because all the subsidies that add distraction on top of what we already do. So, development bank, private or public or multilateral, has the absolutely unique opportunity to begin to shift financial flows in the right direction by providing incentives, by providing, maybe this is a bit hard, but some conditionalities, by incentivizing with policies like, reduce interest rate or whatever, good practices that, by the way, are not just, again, benefiting humanity in abstract. They're actually practices that are going to de-risk the business, de-risk the investment, and create a much more resilient business proposition in moving forward. So that's what you can do. You can help together with governments and regulation, but you can create your own regulation as well. That's the power you have, good practices. And that has happened already in a few countries. But when we're seeing that happening, the impact has been extraordinary in terms of people realizing, people being rewarded for good behavior, best practices that actually benefited them as well. We had the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh, a state of India, I think 27 million people. So it's basically a European country almost. And he said, look, in my state, we have been able to move 1 million smallholder farmers from heavy chemical agriculture to regenerative agriculture, 0 pesticides, natural fertilization, and they will never go back. They told us they will never go, and more are joining. First of all, it's because there was no subsidies. It was a huge cost, and now the cost is gone. Secondly, because the actual yields, they've not decreased that much, maybe 5%. Thirdly, because the amount of diseases related to contamination in that landscape has crashed, from simple things like diarrhea to a much more serious one like cancer. So, I mean, people have realized that actually future with less pesticide or even no pesticide in their own field is actually a better future. And they now won't go back.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially for policymakers, right? Planners and strategies of different states. I was being provocative in the role of MDBs. Of course, we have a couple of good examples. We're a private sector focused institution, so since very often nature recovery and conservation is seen as a public sector activity. For us, it's been a bit of an extra challenge to identify investments that actually help recover nature. But we have the famous examples, Isla Oasis in Aqaba in Jordan, where we supported almost a visionary investor that invested in developing a high-end hotel, recover degraded land, recover the degraded coral reef in front of the hotel, and also created an artificial coral nursery in its own marina to actually expand the ecosystem, the marine ecosystem of that area. I think we need to do more of those, right? How to do it? We need to, let's see. We need to find clients that are visionary like this, but also align incentives of investments and nature in our projects, right? And that's where we need help from people like yourself, from the Nature Positive Initiative, to help us steer and identify where those investments are truly nature positive, right?
I think investing in visionaries like the person, the business that you mentioned is critical. But also, we can't just bank on a few visionaries. We need to use those examples and replicate them at scale and make that vision a vision that society as a whole is able and keen and excited to embrace. Look, the future, today there's so much about gloom and doom future scenarios, which is unfortunately grounded on science, because science is telling us that for the first time in the history of our species, we are reaching tipping points in ecosystems and climate that actually we are provoking. First time. That never happened before in the history of humanity and of the planet, that one species was triggering such an impact to destabilize climate, destabilize ecosystems. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that this generation, which, by the way, is the most environmentally aware of all times, has the opportunity to actually avoid a catastrophic future and build a future which is better than the one we have been experiencing until now.
Just to conclude, Marco, after this very interesting discussion, if there were a message you want the audience to take away, the average person in the street that needed to take a message with them, what would that message be?
The message will be that we are undoubtedly at a crucial junction in the history of humanity, because what is at stake is our relationship with the planet, nature. And so you can look at this moment like a moment of panic and deep concern, and perhaps even doom and gloom, looking at what's happening still to the planet caused by our actions. But also you can look at it as the most exciting opportunity to achieve a turning point in our relationship with the planet and build a safer future for humanity as a whole, but also for all individuals, our families, the world children. And that is what I think I would encourage everybody to look at. This is the most important moment humanity has ever faced.
A message of excitement, a great opportunity to make this world a better place. This is all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adonai.
Thanks for listening to Nature Unheard, where we dive into the big questions shaping our planet's future. Don't forget to follow the podcast wherever you listen so that you don't miss an episode. And if you can't get enough of us, we're at EBRD_official on Instagram or at EBRD on X and Blue Sky. This podcast was made possible thanks to our EBRD donors. It was produced by Olga Aristedo and Cecilia Calatrava from EBRD, with production support from Bespoken Media. Till next time, bye! Thank you for listening. This episode was made possible thanks to the support of the donors to the EBRD's Blue Mediterranean Partnership, including the European Union, Sweden, France, Germany and Spain, as well as the EBRD Southern and Eastern Mediterranean multi-donor account, supported by Australia, Finland, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Spain, the TaiwanBusiness-EBRD Technical Cooperation Fund, and the United Kingdom. Their collective commitment is helping to build a more inclusive and sustainable blue economy across the Mediterranean, bringing tangible benefits to communities and ecosystems alike, including through transformative projects like Isla Oasis.